Hey guys, welcome back to Wentworth Life. Now, if this is your first time here, then hit that subscribe button right now. All my social media links are underneath this video, and make sure you stick around until the end of this video because I will be responding to some of your comments and reactions from my previous video. Right then guys, how are we all feeling after this week's episode? I can tell you now, I had so many emotions when I watched it yesterday. Now before I continue with this video, I do need to post a spoiler warning because I am going to be talking in great detail about this episode. So if you've not seen the episode yet and you don't like spoilers, then what are you doing here? Go watch the episode and then come back. Okay guys, so let's jump straight in. So the opening scene to this episode, I knew this was going to be the first opening scene. I called it in one of my previous videos. So we have Ferguson in the yard having a freaky fantasy where she runs up to Mr. Jackson with a huge kitchen knife and stabs him. And Jake calls Ferguson by the Maxwell name and Joan soon snaps out of it. I just loved this opening scene so much because I loved the song that they used. It felt like the start of a movie and I just loved every moment of it. But Joan's fantasy didn't end there, no. We then saw Jake in a lift with Ferguson, and then Ferguson snapped Jake's neck, like she fantasized about it like 3 times. It was so entertaining to watch, I loved it. But I think the most interesting part of all of this is that once Jake and Ferguson came out of the lift, Ferguson walks past Vera. And I think we were all maybe expecting to see Joan fantasizing about killing Vera at this point, but she didn't. So I'm wondering whether if this means something. Ferguson dreamt about killing Will and Jake, but not Vera. Unless of course something is going to happen in next week's episode, but I just thought it was a little bit strange. It must mean something. Anyway, Ferguson then heads off to a session with Dr. Miller, and I've just got to say guys, how fine is Dr. Miller looking these days? I wish that he was my doctor in real life. Anyway, back to the episode. So Ferguson has a session with Dr. Miller, and you can see straight away that Ferguson is struggling with these sessions. She's having to pretend that she's still Kath Maxwell, but Joan is clearly finding it difficult talking about all her past demons, and at one point she even gets mad and tells Dr. Miller to stop. How this doesn't give Dr. Miller alarm bells already is beyond me, but I can only assume that he is so invested with Joan trying to get her memory back and helping her because, let's face it, it wouldn't look bad on his medical record, would it? So, more on Dr. Miller a little bit later. We then have our favourite Boomer with Mr. Jackson, and my god guys, I have missed this woman. She's a breath of fresh air. I literally love Boomer. We learn in this scene that Lou hasn't been charged with Ali's stabbing due to a lack of evidence. Obviously now we all know as the viewer that it wasn't Lou Kelly anyway, but the women and some of the officers, they all believe that it was Lou. We also find out that Ali is coming out of hospital and back into prison, and Judy is looking worried. Yes Judy, you should be worried after what you did. I feel like Judy nearly gave herself away as well, because in this scene she tries telling Ruby and Boomer that Ali may say some crazy things when she returns. But then Lou arrives with Reb and says to Boomer that she heard that Lips and Eyelashes is coming back and winds Boomer up. Sticking with Lou and Reb tells Lou that she should ease off with the Ali stuff because her friends are all upset at the moment. This is what I like about Reb. Reb tries to bring out the good side of Lou when he can. But I mean, Lou Kelly is what she is, and I suppose she can't resist winding up Boomer due to their old history days. Interestingly though, Lou says to Reb that the women fear her for something that she didn't do. We then have Sheila and Mari sitting in the yard, and of course Lou can't resist winding them both up. Miss Miles then takes Lou and Reb to the visitors room because the police want to see them. At first they think it's to do with the Ali stabbing, but we learn from Sheila that it's something to do with the retreat. Lou and Reb are both questioned, but they both manage to convince the cops that they both left the retreat a month before the fire. This leaves Sheila right in the poo, and Lou and Reb both even say to Sheila in the yard that she is going down for 9 counts of murder and is gonna be in prison for life. Ali is now due back, and all of the women are at the fence waiting for her. At this point we can see Judy looking really worried, like she looks like that she's about to break out into a sweat. And then Judy decides to try and attack Lou Kelly in front of everyone and tries to blame Lou, but she does this in order to try and get herself slotted just before Annie returns. Now I've got to say, it was a pretty pathetic attempt of trying to attack Lou. Literally, Lou just moves out of the way and just nudges Judy over, and Judy just goes flying onto the floor like some cartoon character. Judy is then dragged away by the officers, and then Annie returns. Now, this was such a lovely scene. So we all know that Ali is in a wheelchair. We've known from spoilers for quite some time now. But this is the moment where we all learn the severity of Ali's situation. So Ali tells Boomer and everyone in the yard that the knife has totally damaged her spine. She will not be walking ever again. It's quite a sad scene, and even at one moment you see Lou Kelly's face, and for once not even Lou had a wisecrack to shout out. I'm going to stick with Ali and her journey through this episode just for the moment because I just thought Kate Jenkinson was fantastic. So Judy doesn't get what she wants, and Mr. Jackson tells Judy that he is sending her back to the unit because Annie needs her friends. Little do you know, Mr. Jackson. So back in the unit we see maintenance installing something to Ali's bed to help her get in and out. It was really nice that Boomer actually gives up herself for Ali because apparently Boomer's unit is slightly bigger. We learn that Ali told Mr. Jackson not to tell Boomer and the girls about Ali being paralysed because she didn't want any of them doing anything stupid. We then have Judy walking back to the unit, and Judy and Ali both spot each other. Now I thought this was a really good scene because it was quite tense. So Ali calls Judy over and Judy starts to say that she is sorry, but then Ali jumps in and demands to know what Judy did with the money. Judy then says that she kept it, and then there's this really tense moment where you don't know whether if Ali actually knows that it was Judy who stabbed her or not. Just the way that Ali stares at Judy for a moment, I was literally thinking, wait, does Ali know? But then Ali tells Judy to keep the money and use it to fight her extradition. Judy then bends down and gives Ali a hug, and guys, this moment just made me feel kind of stressed. Judy is making me stressed. Oh, Ali, do not dance with this devil. Now part of me is secretly hoping that Ali knows it was Judy who stabbed her. Maybe Ali caught a glimpse in the mirror before she hit the ground, and Ali is now going to suck Judy in and wait for the right moment to carry out revenge. Maybe Ali thinks that Judy and Lou did it together because of course we did see the moment last year where Ali opened her eyes and saw Lou standing over her. So if Ali did get a glimpse of Judy in the mirror, then maybe she will think that Lou and Judy both worked together to get rid of her. But I'm loving all this speculation and secrets, even though these Judy scenes are making me stressed. There were a few more scenes with Ali, but I want to talk about this scene that actually brought me to tears, and that is Ali taking a shower for the very first time. Oh my god. It broke my heart, and that background music did not help. So Boomer and Ruby help Ali take a shower in a chair, but then Ali totally breaks down into tears, and I tell you what guys, that acting was totally outstanding. I totally felt Ali's pain in that very moment. It was just amazing but heartbreaking at the same time. Okay, so let's just take a little step back. Let's go back to Joan. So we've had her having daydreams of killing Mr. Jackson and Jake, but later on in the episode we saw Joan having another fantasy about killing Will, and this was quite creepy. So we have Joan opening a freezer, and inside we have a dead and frozen Mr. Jackson, and then we have a close-up of his face with his frozen eyeballs. Oh, it was good, but it was very creepy. I loved every moment of it though, I've got to admit. I mean, this got me thinking. We all know in one of those trailers we do see the freezer door being pushed down against someone's hands. I'm wondering whether if Ferguson is going to try and do this for real with Mr. Jackson. I mean, I suppose it would kind of be like being buried alive, but instead you're in a freezer and you're gonna freeze to death. But I do think that it could be Will or maybe even Jake who will eventually end up in the freezer for real. Now let's talk about Rita, one of my favourites. So Rita is still on the outside on the run from the cops, and she goes to see her dying dad, which we all guessed that she would do. So when Rita arrives at the house, there is a woman putting clothes clothes out to dry. Now, I'm not sure whether if this is Rita and Ruby's mum, or if it's just some other relative, or maybe even just a full-time carer. It wasn't really explained in this episode. But Rita goes and sits by her dad, and later on in the episode, Ruby rings Rita, and Rita tells Ruby that their dad is pretty out of it on painkillers at the moment. Rita puts the phone to her dad's ear, and Ruby talks to him. And this was another scene where I nearly had tears, but I just about managed to contain myself. Rita says her goodbyes to Ruby, but then the dad starts to make some noises, but of course, you know, he is pretty out of it. Rita talks to him and tells him that she's there, and at one moment it sounds like that her dad is pleased, but then the dad says, yeah, Rita is long gone now, it's just me and you now, Ruby. So the dad thinks that it's Ruby at his bedside and not Rita, and this was just so sad. You can see that Rita really wants to make amends before he passes away. I really hope in next week's episode he wakes up and they can have a chat and a conversation to try and sort things out. Now, I know a few of you lovely people out there have been commenting about Rita possibly being Ruby's mum. Actually, this has been a rumour for quite a few years now, and I tell you what guys, you could be right. There could be a big reveal coming in next week's episode, and there has to be a reason why we are having these scenes in this final chapter. It's gotta mean something. They wouldn't put filler scenes in just 10 final episodes. So are we going to find out that Rita is Ruby's mum? Well, we might just have to wait to see, but I'm 50-50 on this one guys. It could happen. We have Vera keeping a very close eye on Joan in the CCTV room, and Jake comes in and he's just like, what you doing, Vera? But Vera is adamant that she has noticed changes in Joan recently, and of course she's not wrong. But Jake thinks that Vera is looking far too much into it all, and I have an awful feeling that Vera is going to run herself ragged soon, and Ferguson might even end up reporting Vera to the social services later on in the season. I just have a little feeling. While Vera is watching Joan, we find out that the freezer in the kitchen is broken, and this is the very freezer that we've seen in one of those trailers. Later on, Mr. Jackson comes in to check and see if the freezer has been fixed, and while he checks the freezer out, Joan starts to get one of her killer urges again. It's a very tense scene, and Joan even picks up a knife from the sink and cleans it on a towel, and for a split moment there, it looked like that Joan was about to slice and dice Mr. Jackson and stick him in the freezer for today's lunch. But Joan leaves the kitchen in a little bit of a panic and asks to see Dr. Miller. It's at this stage when Ferguson literally arrives in Dr. Miller's office and just turns around and says, I am Joan Ferguson. Like, literally Joan just admits there and then that she has her memory back. She even tells Miller that she's had her memory back for weeks. Dr. Miller calls for an officer to take her back to the unit, and he's obviously quite pissed off with her, but later on Dr. Miller asks her back to his office and he closes the blinds, and then he pulls out some pills. Now, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of the drug, but you'll see it on the screen now as you're watching. But basically these drugs are experimental from what I can remember, and basically it's to try and help psychopaths promote social behaviour such as empathy. So literally Dr. Miller wants Ferguson to keep her mouth shut about getting her memory back, and in return he is going to give Ferguson these pills because he thinks it may help her with her murderous urges, until she gets out of prison, that is. But he tells her that she can't tell anyone about getting her memory back or even taking these drugs. So, like, wait just a minute there. We've been here before, haven't we guys? Remember what happened to Liz Birdsworth? Now, not only did the medicine probably contribute to Liz's stroke, but Liz also had a bad reaction at one point and she ended up attacking Kaz in the unit back in season 7. Now, I don't know if these drugs are the same pills that Liz was taking, because I'm sure Dr. Miller was trying to cure dementia back then, but what if these pills that he's given to Ferguson react in a similar way to Liz? And what if these pills make Ferguson attack someone? Like, I'm not being funny, but if Ferguson does decide to flip out, then I hope everyone can run, because she is going to be snapping necks right, left and centre. But on a serious note, like, what the hell does Dr. Miller think he's doing? I'm telling you now, he has just signed his own death warrant. I predicted a while back that I think Dr. Miller will end up helping Ferguson, but he'll also be on death's list by the end of the season. Not only that, but Ferguson can now somehow blackmail him with those drugs that he's given her. I mean, Miller has just confirmed to Joan that he is willing to do anything to save his job and his career. So I definitely think Joan is going to have Dr. Miller dancing on her piece of string very soon. Don't get me wrong, I still fancy the pants off Dr. Miller, but he ain't going to make it, I'm telling you now. Back to Ali for just a moment, and Will and Vera are chatting to her in the office and pleading for her to give the name of the attacker, but in Ali's own words, she lagged once before and now look where she is. But when Ali said this to Will, this made me kind of stressed again, because why hasn't anyone questioned who told Lou about Ali lagging? Like, how do they think it all got out? Someone has to question it. And as we all know, it was Anne Reynolds, which, by the way guys, did you notice Anne Reynolds wasn't in this episode? I thought it was a little bit weird, but I'm guessing she'll be back next week after the death of Reb, and no doubt she will put all the blame onto Mr. Jackson. I mean, enjoy the peace and quiet now while you can, Mr. Jackson. In a later scene, Ali is in the yard and Boomer and Ruby go and get Ali some treats. Lou then takes this opportunity to threaten Annie about the missing money once again, but Annie tells her that she doesn't have the money, and at one point Annie even says to Lou, "Go on, kill me, you'll be doing me a favour." Luckily, Boomer and Ruby come running over, and at one point Boomer grabs Lou, but this really pisses Lou off, and they both circle each other before Lou walks off, and I have a feeling these two are going to come to proper blows next week. Later on, Ali announces to everyone that she is stepping down as top dog, and that she's nominating Boomer until they can all have a proper vote. I thought this was actually quite a nice scene, as the women were all like, "Yay, go Boomer," which I thought was quite nice. So Boomer is now top dog of Wentworth, but like I've said in previous videos, I can't see it lasting too long. Okay, let's talk about a rather uncomfortable scene with Sheila and Judy in the shower block. So Sheila is in the shower sorting herself out, and in walks Judy Bryant, who gets her clothes off and jumps into one of the shower cubicles. Sheila is like in the mirror then, just perving on Judy, and Judy says that she forgot her shower gel, but Sheila steps in and says that she can use some of hers. Sheila then continues to watch Judy in the shower through the mirror, and you can see that Sheila is really getting off on it, and she's really got the hots for Judy. Sheila then starts to floss her teeth, and no word of a lie guys, when I first watched this episode, I was watching it with headphones on, and the sound of Sheila flossing her teeth violently was literally gross. Sheila was starting to floss her teeth really hard, to the point where her gums were bleeding. I literally thought at one point her teeth were gonna start popping out. It was so disgusting. So Sheila has the hots for Judy, but she's trying to fight her lesbian urges because she's clearly messed up after all the stuff that happened in the cult. Later on, Sheila learns that the police aren't going to question anyone else in those 9 murders, and Sheila is going to be charged with all 9 accounts. So Sheila starts to get really worried now, and quite understandably, but then Mari walks over to her in the yard and starts to manipulate her. It's probably worth mentioning that earlier on in the episode, Mari did go and have a chat with Ali, and Ali did tell Mari that she saw Lou when she was attacked. So now back to this scene. Mari wants Lou dead. She wants to kill Lou because she thinks Lou stabbed Ali, and also wants to get Lou away from Reb. So Mari uses this opportunity to wind Sheila up by telling Sheila that it was Lou who killed all those people at the retreat and Mendel. She goes on to say that Lou and Reb have each other and Sheila has no one, just the same old faces and the same old mattress. Like, Mari literally rubs salt into the wounds in this scene. It ends up with Mari saying to Sheila that she has 2 choices, to kill herself or to kill the woman who framed her and the woman who killed Mendel. Because Sheila tells Mari that she was in love with Mendel. And this brings me on to the heartbreaking ending scene. So Mari works with Sheila because Mari thinks that Sheila is going to kill Lou and basically do Mari's dirty work for her. So when Sheila asks Mari if she can get any sedatives, then Mari does. Because basically Sheila says she needs to drug both Lou and Reb so Reb can keep out of the way when Sheila makes her move. Now I actually predicted this in one of my prediction videos. Unfortunately, that's the only part of the prediction that I was right about. So Sheila does put the sedatives into Reb and Lou's drinks in the yard, which they both end up drinking. Lou and Reb then head off back to their unit and they have a steamy love scene before they fall asleep. Sheila in the meantime has cut up a sheet and she is making a rope onto a spoon, which we've seen in one of the trailers. So while Lou and Reb are both asleep on the sedatives together, Sheila heads to the door armed with this string and spoon. And then we see Sheila walking back out into the yard, and Sheila gives Mari the look of, it's done, she's dead. Mari then decides to rest her head onto Joan's shoulder, and do you know what, for some really strange reason I absolutely loved this moment. I mean, Mari puts her head onto Joan's shoulder and then Joan is like, what the fuck is going on? It was brilliant. We then cut back to Lou and Reb in bed together, wrapped around each other, hugging while they are both sleeping. Lou then opens her eyes and sees a spoon on Reb's neck. The penny drops for Lou straight away. She sees the string tightened around Reb's neck and Reb is as pale as a sheet. Lou gets up and she tries to get it off Reb really quickly, but it's just too late. Reb is dead, he's gone. Mari and Joan walk back to the unit and Mari, she starts to hear Lou screaming, and at this point you can see Mari's looking a little bit confused as to why she can hear Lou alive. Mari opens the door and sees Lou holding Reb in her arms, trying to wake him up. Mari is asking what's wrong with Reb, but at this point Lou is screaming at the top of her voice, and Mari keeps asking what's wrong with him, but then Lou pushes her out and closes the door. Joan then pushes the panic alarm and then the episode ends with the panic alarm playing over the credits. My god guys, this final scene was quite shocking. We all knew it was coming, but I don't think it prepared us all for what was going to happen, especially for Lou's horrifying screams. It was awful. I also think it's quite disturbing the way that Lou was like asleep hugging Reb, not knowing that Reb was dead. I think it's just so messed up and it's really going to haunt Lou for the rest of her life, I can tell you. But why did Sheila decide to kill Reb over Lou? Well, my thoughts on this is that Sheila wanted to hurt Lou the same way Lou hurt her. So Lou killed Menden, I can't even remember his name now, but basically the guy from the retreat. Lou murdered him, and Sheila said in the episode that she loved him. So Sheila decided to kill Reb because Lou loves Reb. Basically, Lou took away Sheila's love of her life, so Sheila did the same to Lou. And I tell you what guys, Mari did not see that one coming. This is not only going to destroy Lou, but it's also going to destroy Mari. Mari was really fond of Reb, and Reb even reminded Mari of her own son. And it's going to be even worse for her because Mari was the one who wound Sheila up. I dread to think what's going to happen next week, but what a way to end the very first episode. This episode had everything. It made me laugh and it also made me cry. Even the panic button made an appearance. It was just so good. And even though a lot did happen in this episode, I reckon this episode is probably going to be the most calmest episode compared to the rest of the season. So I think my favourite part in this whole episode was the opening scene with the One Step Ahead music being played in the background. And I think probably my least favourite moment was probably Judy trying to attack Lou Kelly and trying to get herself purposely slaughtered. I have no time for Judy Bryant. She is the main cause for so much that's happening, and I just hope she gets her comeuppance very soon, but I have got a horrible feeling that she's going to be causing a bit more mayhem before that happens. I noticed as well a lot of things that appeared in a lot of the trailers happened in this first episode, and I think a few other scenes will be appearing in next week's episode, so we've got a lot of surprises in store for us. So my predictions for next week's episodes, I think we are going to be seeing Lou in a very bad place when the episode begins. Her world has been destroyed, and I think when she finally gets her head together, she is going to take it out on the rest of the prison, and this is when we will see her declaring herself top dog. I also think we will then have the official vote for top dog, but Lou will step in and challenge Boomer, and this is when we'll get that fight scene in the laundry. I think Rita's dad will wake up next week, and a few revelations may be revealed. I also think Rita might give herself up, or she will be caught by the police by the very end of next week's episode. Mari is going to be in an awful situation. I mean, how does Mari tell Lou that it was Sheila who killed Reb without implicating herself? And also, apparently there is a fantastic death scene next week, so this could be Sheila's departure. I said in one of my previous videos, I think Sheila will either end up killing herself or Lou will kill her. Whatever happens, Lou going on the rampage will begin next week and things are going to kick off. So what did you guys think of the first episode? I've been reading some reactions on Twitter and Facebook and most of them are extremely positive. Actually, I would say 99.9% of them have been positive. But let me know your thoughts in the comments box below of the opening episode. Okay then guys, it's now time for some comment replies. So we have Matthew Lawton. I've just pre-ordered Wentworth Season 8 Part 2 out on the 22nd of November 2021, £25 on Amazon. Thank you Craig for all the good work over the years. Oh, thank you for that really lovely comment Matthew, and thank you for letting me know that it's actually available to be pre-ordered on Amazon. I'm going to do that right now because I cannot wait to get this on Blu-ray. Thank you for your comment Matthew. And we have Shirley Radats. Your theory on Judy is probably spot on. I think she'll put the vest on Anne. I also think Lou is trying to escape to get to Rev's funeral. Of course you know my theories really suck. Aw, don't be too tough on yourself Shirley. None of us know what's gonna happen and no theory sucks, honestly. But yes, I do believe that Judy is going to blow up the prison, but she's not going to do it by like making a bomb. I think she's going to do it by wearing a vest or sticking the vest on someone else. And it's going to be brutal. Thank you for your comment Shirley. And we have Kiki Christie. It looks like she took her own eye out with this spoon in her hand. Yes Kiki, oh my god, I've gotta say. So basically we're talking about the photo. There's a photo, it was in one of my other videos. It's also all over Instagram and Facebook, and it's a photo of Eve Wilder with a very bad looking eye, and it looks like that she hasn't got an eyeball. Basically she's missing an eye, I think, and she's holding a spoon. And really funny story, my partner Peter, he has got a thing about eyeballs, like it really turns him sick. So when I showed him that photo, he nearly vomited. So when that episode comes out, I'm gonna have to pre-watch it and pre-warn him when that scene comes on, because he may even faint about that. So yeah, Eve Wilder, it looks like she's gonna like somehow scoop her own eyeball out with a spoon or something. I don't know, maybe Ferguson will do it. I just really hope that they're not too gruesome with this scene. Like, do you remember when Ferguson cut out Juicy Lucy's tongue? I really hope that they get a bit of a cutaway and we don't actually see the eyeball being scooped out. Oh god, innit? Anyway, Kiki Christie, thank you for your comment. And we have Mari Preston. Oh, your cat is adorable. I am beyond excited for Wentworth. Oh, thank you, Mari. So yes, I actually have 4 cats, and their names are Ruby, Buddy, Frankie and Jacko. And yes, Frankie is named after Frankie from Wentworth. Ruby isn't though. Unfortunately, I'd like to cheat and say I named Ruby after Ruby from Wentworth, but Ruby I got before Wentworth began, so yeah, never mind. But anyway, thank you for your comment, Mari, and as usual, thank you all for your amazing comments. I'm really interested in seeing your reactions to the very first episode, so don't forget to leave those comments underneath this video. Okay then, well if you're still here, then thank you all for sticking around until the end of this video. Have a great weekend, guys. Now, I'm away as from tomorrow, and I'm not going to be back until Monday, so there won't be any new content posted until next week. But if I do hear any more news before next week's episode, I will try my best to try and get it uploaded before Tuesday. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week for episode 2. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you all again very soon.